Ready when you are.
Let's ride. Oh, are we good, Scoot, on the stream? Cool. Beautiful.
I'm watching.
Oh, okay. Cool. We got eyes on this. All right, here we go. Hey, and welcome to I Want to Be Your Canary. This is a Final Fantasy podcast. And tonight I am graced with the presence of my two dear friends, Mr. TJ.
Ahoy.
And Mr. Scooter. Oh man, this is one that we've been talking about for a while. Talking about doing this one for a while, but it's always had to be the right time.
Definitely gonna have to buckle up for this guy.
It's a funny game too because it was such a variance on Final Fantasy at the time. It really was. This really kind of the first non, you know, um, classic JRPG that we know with Final Fantasy. I think
I think so. Like Mystic Quest was still
oh
kind of
yeah.
a turn-based
Yeah.
JRPG, just with less characters.
Mystic Quest was a weird game. We'll do that one time. We'll do that at some point. But yeah, that was a weird one. But that is not today. Today we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy Tactics. So Final Fantasy Tactics, oh, just the best. The best. And
Absolutely.
oh, just such a great game. And it's funny because for as much as I complain about Final Fantasy going away from turn-based RPG and just like I moan about that to the point of ad nauseum sometimes. This is my favorite Final Fantasy game. I love it.
It's right up there in terms of sheer replay value, like amount of hours sunk into the game. Number one, not really that close either.
Yeah.
Um, 7 and 8 are got a place close to my heart, but in terms of just raw playthroughs, replay, 100-hour saves, this is your game.
I would say for me, I think I've told both of you that my knowledge base on this game is not going to be up to par compared to yours, but it's because it was such a big game even back then. I remember, having several tries to get started with it when I first got it, and it took me a minute to really get into the groove of the game. And I could see how you could just dump so many hours into this because with the job systems and stuff, the variety of play styles that were available, and obviously the huge storylines. I could see how you could dump a lot of time into it. So I'm not gonna give it necessarily like a official ranking for me yet because I don't feel like I should. So I'm gonna leave it kind of ambiguous. It's obviously a really good one.
Yeah. And this game has it's not just one thing that makes it great. And typically your favorite games aren't just one thing that make it great. But this is a game that really just it has an unbelievable story. And this this game came out after 7. I can't remember where exactly it was. Was it in between 7 and 8?
That's right.
And
So a
yeah,
weird time to release a game like this, right? Is you just released a groundbreaking giant, 3D game in 7, and then you kind of, didn't feel like they were taking steps back, but it was just not what I was expecting from a Final Fantasy, like you're saying.
It was an odd game to lend the Final Fantasy name to.
Sure.
I mean, this is a hit whether you call it Final Fantasy or you call it something else. It just so happens that the lore borrowing from the Final Fantasy genre fit in so well with the game that it made it that much
Yeah.
better. But this game, by any other name, is still one of my favorites, bar none. But you're right. It was odd, and I don't really have a whole lot of backstory on what the logic was. On it was Square Soft, not Square Enix at the time, and yeah, I'm not sure why they took that chance, but I'm really happy they did.
Yeah, after seven was a pretty linear story. Eight got weird, which we've talked
Right.
about, but like what we had access to at that time, or the mainline Final Fantasy that had come through, had pretty linear story. Like, I guess pretty easy to follow storylines. And then they drop tactics, and it's like, whoa, you you can't just button mash X through the story and go, I know what's going on. Like you can with a lot of games, like, okay, that's the bad guy.
Right.
Stays the bad guy. Oh, wait a second. Psych, he's not the bad
Right.
guy. There's somebody controlling him, so on and so forth. But with this one, it was such a complicated, complex,
A nuanced
know,
telling of a classic story of in ways and set in a really interesting setting. But the complexity of it was, it was a lot to take in for sure.
And I love it because at the beginning of it, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm just about to hit you up with some revisionist history as to, this story that's all about this one character, but it's not really about that one
Right.
character. That one character doesn't, the character that should be getting all of the credit and who doesn't is, this character, Ramza. So yeah, that I just like that. It's like right away, it's like, oh, here's a story and here's the revisionist history behind it. But yeah, it's a very it's probably one of the darkest storytellings of a Final Fantasy game, I would say. Certainly up until that point. I mean, 7 was dark, the world is being drained of its energy and like yeah, that was dark, but this one was, and we're not going to talk story today so much, but the state and the powers that be in the state are divided, and then the church has its own agenda, and it was very just medieval. It just kind of reminded you, it was a time when the church had a ton of power, which those are times that we've seen in the our world history, and the Roman Catholic Church just having just buku power, um, and kind of you can kind of see that. You can kind of see it being a player in a world defining moment, like, oh, there's these stones out there, and there's a uh, there's power that's up for grab, and you can see the church going, oh well, hey, maybe we can throw our hat into the ring. So it's
If
just a
if you like political intrigue, if you like betrayal, if you
mm-hmm.
like complicated webs of story, this game is going to be for you. However, the game exposes the story in a manner different than almost any other Final Fantasy to that point because there is no walking around and talking to an
Right.
NPC.
Yeah.
So the story is exclusively told through in between battle cutscenes and occasionally some dialogue during battle.
Yep. Yeah. And but the way that they do it, the game itself, the interactions and the cutscenes, for lack of a better term, and when I say cutscenes, I don't mean like, oh man, look at those sweet
Right.
graphics, that we're used to when we talk about the PS1 games, but just the scenes where dialogue is happening, it's so much more just like believable, and the actions of the characters. Like there's one where Ramza and so, I think, like just something simple as like hug or shake hands on a
Mm-hmm.
bridge. And for the to be able to see that in these low res characters, essentially, it's like, oh man, they did a really good job of doing that, and it's just really cool to see. um it's proof that you don't need to go crazy on
Well,
graphics to have a great
yeah.
story, even when the graphics are
No,
available to
and
do
that's a
so.
good point, though. It's kind of like we were talking with the release date of this between 7 and 8 is, like I said, you have these visually peak, kind of games at the time, um, in 7 and 8, and then you see this, and you're going, are we stepping back in graphic fidelity with this game? And in a way, you kind of were, but it was really well done. In the art
Hmm.
style or the design, I guess, of how the game was made. Um, so even
Yeah.
playing it to this day, it doesn't feel, bad. It still looks good.
Well, for what it's worth, games in this genre, this was by far the best looking game in the tactics, you know, genre per se. It wasn't really called tactics as a genre, but your comparables to this game at the time were Tactics
Mm-hmm.
Ogre, which
Hmm.
this game is superior to graphically, um, and Fire Emblem, which again also very superior to graphically. So if you're comparing Final Fantasy Tactics to 7,
With,
it is going to be a little
sure.
lacking. But if you're going to compare Tactics to its comparables, i.e., other tactics games, visually
Hmm.
stunning, things that have never been done before. So you kind of have to just change your lens a little bit when you pick this
Yep.
one up for the first time, um, because it really depends on what you compare it to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because you if you picked it up, I feel like if you picked it up when it was released, being sandwiched in between 7 and 8, you might go,
Mm-hmm. I mean, I
what?
feel like, I might have been in that boat a little bit, just because I guess I was not expecting that. Um, but I
Hmm.
also wasn't a person that had played, ogre battles or, what was the other one you mentioned there, TJ? Fire
Fire
Emblem.
Emblem on the Nintendo systems.
I don't think I got around to either of those series, so it was a whole new thing for me. Um,
Yeah, and it's a game where you can compare it to something like Disgaea, where it's almost two sides of the spectrum, because Disgaea is just such an off the wall, crazy bananas game, um, in the tactics based sense, in the way what they do with the grid and how they. I mean, it's just weird. It's fun. Don't get me wrong, but Final Fantasy Tactics seems like a very much more
mm,
practical, if you will. I understand that, saying, oh, well, they have summons and magic and everything. How's that
yeah,
practical? But if you play Disgaea for about 3 minutes, you can understand exactly what I'm talking about. So it seemed like a much more practical approach to the tactics style, or the
yeah.
turn-based grid
I mean, yeah,
style. Right.
picking it up on your first playthrough, or getting in your first battle, you're aware of what the mechanics and the battle system kind of are right away. Is
Mm-hmm.
It's a grid system, so you can move, as one of your actions to a certain area of grids or within that area, um, and do a number of other things. But it's pretty simply laid out for you, which I did enjoy, definitely, because had it gotten more complicated than it already was, I don't know.
Interestingly enough, the comparables to tactics at the time, i.e., Fire Emblem. to this day is still just X and Y,
Oh, really?
right? You move on a top-down grid.
Huh.
Tactics was a little bit different in that, it introduced height and
Yeah.
depth.
Yeah.
If you walked in a certain spot in a river, you submerged and you couldn't act, you couldn't
Yeah.
do anything. On the flip side, if you put your archers at the top of
Yep.
the hill, they could shoot
Yep.
farther.
Mm-hmm.
Really creative uses of the maps that they could build.
Yes.
I remember the first fight. I think it was in Dorter Trade City, and you're fighting within a city limits.
Mm-hmm.
And there were archers at the top of this shanty town, and you're at the bottom trying to navigate your way around and avoid getting hit by a hail of arrows. And it's early in the game, and you're not exactly overpowered at the time, so it's I always remember the maps
Mm-hmm.
being one of my most favorite aspects of this game, where you know they were creative and how they used the maps that they had built to generate um, fun encounters that kept you thinking about how can I properly deploy my
Mm-hmm.
team,
Right.
avoid getting killed, and be effective and win. I
Well,
loved it.
and to kind of relate to a modern or even a game before this, like TJ, we started playing D&D a little bit, and Colin, I know you've played that. Like,
Oh,
I
you
get
know it.
some familiarity with D&D and how the turn-based kind of actions work. Um, but like to me, I still kind of got like these Baldur Gate sort of feels from like a modern game like that, if you will. It's similar in a way to how that plays out, which it's fun. It's really a cool way to play a game. So
Yeah, I mean it's God, there's just so much the map, like you said, and utilizing the map to your
mm-hmm.
benefit, utilizing the map to the job classes that you have available to you.
Absolutely.
Like it's a bit it's a real strategy
Yep.
game in the way that you'll it's vital for you to there will be certain battles where you're like I I'm building up this person in this job class right now, but if I try and keep them in this job class right now,
It's
I'm
not
never going to win this
right.
battle.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Yep.
And you have to revert to something um, earlier, something that you're stronger in, or something that has gives you maybe every job class has. Some of them have maybe a little bit more movement. Some of them give you more MP. Some give you more HP. So all the job classes they're not only different in the what you're able to do, but they modify your stats just a little bit, and it's sometimes really important that you take advantage of that. And when you do the Y graph and Velius fight, like I did that recently, and the he's so powerful, and you just have to avoid him for so long. Um, because it's one of those like, do you want to save right
Mm-hmm.
now? And then you're like, oh yeah. And if you don't have a backup save, it's like, oh well, now I have to figure out how to beat this dude, this
Yep.
demon. And so it's like, you gotta go, okay, well, geez, I'm getting wiped out on 2 hits. I need to find something that gives me a little bit more HP. Okay, well, I guess I'll go back to being, a squire
A monk or
or
something, right?
so
Yep.
yeah, something. And so you have to, the strategy's there. And for I know for me in particular, and I can't speak for you guys, but you can let me know if this is kind of the same. When I'm playing a game like that, where it's a job class, it's like, okay, I don't want to move him off of this job class or move her off of this job class until the job class is
Right.
complete.
It
Yep. Me too.
I mean, it's hard. It's
So
that completion is part of us, right? That you got to get it done, and you're grinding away at it, and you're that close, and then you come across a fight where that clearly is not the right strategy.
yeah,
It's tough cookies, man.
and,
I
and that
bet.
Y graph Velius fight is is an all time toughie in Final Fantasies. That's not a
easily
main boss.
easily one of the hardest fights in the game. To unpack that one, it's a one-on-one fight with the boss. Whereas normally you have your team of 5 or 6 characters backing you up, but it's one-on-one, and you have to find a way to survive. And it's tough. I remember that was a save killer fight right there.
Oh yeah. And then when you do beat Ygraph and he turns into Velius, it becomes even more of a problem. And then he brings his demon buddies. You do get your party then, but whatever Ramses' health is at is what Ramses' health's at that point.
Yep.
So if Rams is holding on by a thread, you're gonna have to spend the next couple turns making sure that Ramses stays alive. So it's not a cakewalk game.
No, not at all. Yeah.
It is one that will give you a run for your money, and there's no cheap wins. There's no cheap bat. There's no. It's one of those that as you're going around the map, you might get into an encounter that might be relatively easy, but there are also ones where you'll get into one with like a bunch of like the black or red chocobos. It's just like, oh man, it doesn't really matter how strong you are. They use that meteor, and whatever else it is that they use. It's just like, oh man, this is bad. There's some battles that you can just get totally wiped in, and
it is
and
the
up until
Final
that point,
Fantasy. It is the Final Fantasy equivalent of game overing to a random encounter.
Yeah.
And it will happen to you more than once in this game.
Mm-hmm.
There is an auto battle feature, and I remember getting into a fight with the squid larkin that can confuse you.
Oh.
And I remember like I think I was playing on my Vita. I was on a bus, and I just kind of turned it on auto battle, and I was going to grab a drink or something, and I came back to my game, and I was dead.
Jeez.
So you can't take this one easy, or it'll make you pay.
It's not a hold down X smash like you were saying, Colin, kind of game. It is a strategic game to the core, and it plays very well at that. But yeah, it will punish you if you're not paying attention in even some simple fights. Now, that being said, though, I wouldn't say that it's as rough as Final Fantasy, the original, like starting out in that game, even playing through later in that game, it was so unforgiving.
No, but Final Fantasy 1 is just hasn't aged well. It's just not fun.
So it's maybe not a fair comparison, but I'm just saying it's not that bad in tactics. So don't shy away from it thinking it's just gonna be death screens all day.
No, but the nice thing about, and obviously a huge difference between them, is one, the way that the experience system works is you get experience based on whatever action that you do, and you can really manipulate this if you want, where Ramsa can throw a stone at one of your characters, and then your character heals with a potion. You throw stone, heal, and you can do that all day and literally become level 99 in one battle technically. And so you could do that. I think that the game is robust enough that you don't have to do that. If you want to really get into higher level stuff, you're able to, just based on playing the game as intended. Right. It is fun to go around and kind of farm a little bit, and just build up your characters and get job points for the different job classes there are, because there's quite a few job classes.
And I wrote it down. Is 22 sound right? Or
it depends on what version of the game we're talking about.
Yeah, the War of the Lions
added in a couple more.
Yeah, Onion Knight and the Dark Knight.
Yeah, that's right. And the original one didn't have those. The kind of be all end all job ended up being the mime in that game.
And I have a lot to say about the
Yeah,
job
yeah.
classes, but um, the job classes were also cool because it's like, oh, you want to be a ninja. Well, that requires you to be X level this, X level this, and X level this, and now you've opened up the
Mhm.
ninja. So you really had to work to make your character pretty well rounded if you wanted to open up those deeper
I thought that was
characters.
so cool, though.
Oh,
Still
I
to
love
this
that.
day, just the unlocking job system, very rewarding, and yeah, it was
Oh,
neat.
It
yeah,
was an interesting system
very
that
rewarding.
it was tree based. So,
Mm-hmm.
there was almost like two halves of the tree, the kind of, physical attack side that started with Squire and kind of went through Knight and Archer and so on down the tree. And then the other side started with
Hmm.
Chemist and kind of led
Mm-hmm.
you down the magic tree. And depending on, the strengths and weaknesses of your starting lineup, you kind of quickly found out who made sense to be what early on in the game based off of some stats that they would be rolled with at the start called Brave and
Hmm.
Faith.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting kind of way to move forward in the game and kind of differentiate your characters from one another.
And had a Brave and Faith had a um an interesting effect on things like move find item,
That's right.
where your move find item, what you would find would be different based on if you had higher Brave or higher Faith. So that was that was an interesting thing that they did, because I know that there's one part of the area, it's a cave of something, cave of Narsh. I don't know if that's right, but you could go in there and find some pretty gnarly items. But you had to do it correctly. You had to have, it's like, okay, well, if you're brave super high, this is what you'll find, but if your faith super high, this will is what you'll find.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
kind of interesting.
It's a system that hadn't been seen up until that point, and quite honestly, I don't think we've seen it since. But
Yeah.
it was a way to kind of gather uh, differences in a game where if you really wanted to, everybody could be exactly the same. So I
Yeah.
thought it was clever. It made for unpredictability in fights because
Mm-hmm.
your magic may or may not work on a low faith character. So it made for unpredictability, which is kind of the source of fun in a lot of those fights.
Yeah. Um, the job system was awesome. Favorite job. What was your favorite
So,
job in it?
I
Go
mean,
ahead,
so I
Scoot.
also want to preface this a little bit with like, I was going to pose a question to you guys, like, how did you cheese the job system? I guess, if that makes sense, is did you feel like there was one or two classes that just were broken? For me, and again, I didn't get too far. It felt like the calculator and God, what was the other one? Monk, I think I was playing. Um, they both
Yeah.
felt very strong. Uh, I don't think I finished all of the classes for sure. I know I didn't, so uh, can't speak too much on it. But I would say the calculator or monk for me.
Oh, I already know mine. If you want to go,
Sure.
TJ.
Just to expound on that, calculator was for me was overpowered, but only as your secondary ability,
Mm,
because calculators were so slow
yes.
Yeah.
that your effectiveness was hampered by your inability to get more than one turn by the time everybody else on the map had
Right.
moved twice. So the trick was to get through all your calculator abilities and equip that on your sub command
Mm-hmm.
so that your wizard, black mage, whatever you want to call it, depending on the version of the game you're playing, um, would have a calculator ability as their sub ability, but still got to go
Oh
fast,
shit.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For my money, it was definitely um, maybe a couple of abilities that came with certain jobs. So Hamido from the monk kind of made you broken in fights where there were a lot of human characters, because you basically would counter every hit that came
Right.
your way.
I guess it didn't feel quite broken, but it felt very powerful.
It absolutely. There was one from Samurai as well. Samurai I thought was an overpowered job. The way Samurai worked in the game was you had abilities based off of the Samurai katana that you had. Um, Not necessarily the ones you had equipped, but the ones you had in your inventory, and they could apply buffs like protect, shell, haste. They could do damage. They could siphon MP. Um, I thought Samurai was pretty broken once you got it, and their reaction ability, Blade Grasp, basically stopped incoming hits from hitting you, um, based off of, I think it was 100% minus whatever your brave was.
Ooh.
So if you had a very high brave character, like Ramsey usually was for
Yeah.
me,
Mm-hmm.
at 95%, everybody was only hitting you at a 5% clip, and that
Jeez.
tends to trivialize some
Yeah.
encounters if it's based off of physical attacks. So not every encounter is like that, but I found Samurai to be pretty overpowered.
For me, it wasn't necessarily the character, but it was the ability. It was the dancer, the forbidden dance.
Mm.
You just throw the dancer in the corner and you just throw the forbidden dance out there, and every turn somebody's either getting blind, hits all of the um, enemies. It's blind, confusion, silence, toad, poison, slow stop, or sleep. And it's not like, oh, well, I was, or the monster was silenced last turn and now it stops. You just keep it going, and you can just set the dancer in the corner or wherever, and after 3 turns, monsters are out there. It's like, what is going on? Where am I? Who am I? Like, I'm dying. I don't know what's happening. But it was just absolutely devastating. It was like having a slow Marlboro on your team, and just being able to just cycle in these negative effects. So the dancer for me, the forbidden dance, just those status
Yeah.
ailments is just so
See, that's
devastating, especially if you have a bridge, or if you have a gap between a good decent sized gap between you and the enemies. It's like you can withdraw for a
yeah.
little bit and let them come to you, and then it's like after a couple turns, like, okay, here we go.
I mean, I
I think it's great that this just goes to show maybe some of our listeners that none of us had the same
yeah.
comments, and it just goes to show you that there's so many different ways to play the same game, that the replayability really stands the test of time, because depending on what you'd like to focus on, your approach to
Mm-hmm.
battle and how to win
Yep.
changes
So much.
significantly.
And I thought for sure you guys were going to name different jobs I had listed here for, your.
Okay, let me go back to that, because that's an
No,
ability, not so
okay,
much the
okay, okay,
job
okay.
itself.
Yeah, yeah.
My favorite job, and this isn't even close. My favorite job is Geomancer. I think Geomancer is, I mean, it's a hard hitter, but it also, like, the Geomancing ability, the Geomancer's ability of using the different terrains that they're
Yep.
on, to guarantee hit. The damage is guaranteed, and then everything that you have also has a potential status effect that goes along with it. Um, and I think that the Geomancer, because you can use those abilities as a secondary ability too, and it's like, oh man, it's so devastating. I think, because even if you're out of range, you have a chance to hit with that Geomancer's ability, Elemental, I think it is, and based on the terrain, and even if they're 3 or 4 spaces
Hmm.
away, you can still hit them with something, and sometimes it's like some devastating, it'll like turn them to stone,
Yeah.
or sleep or confusion or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, and then you get up there and it's like, and I'm super powerful with a sword, good. So I love the Geomancer. Geomancer is the cream of the crop for me. But I do love Forbidden Dance. Shout out Forbidden Dance dancer.
There you go. I mean, that's the thing is that I feel like every
Int-
playthrough I'm gonna discover something new in this game because I haven't, like I said, played all of them to the fullest. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this game is that there's also, in addition to the generic characters that you have, there's also, kind of NPCs. They're not generic. They're vital to the story that will also join your party. While normal uh, run of the mill uh, characters are all squires, there's a handful of characters that have different jobs as their starting job, ranging from horrible, looking at you, Nala, to completely game breaking, looking at you, Orlando. So
Yeah.
and if you want to full time those guys, you absolutely can. You don't have to roll with your normal lineup of Ramza and four generic dudes. You can use some of those characters as well, and there's so many different ways to play the game. It's really it really makes for some replayability for sure.
Oh yeah, and like you said, you can either roll with those characters that you're building up, and the nice thing is even when you get some of those better characters, like Agrith and Orlando's just unstoppable, Mustadio, those ones where you want to substitute them into your party. Those other characters that you've been building up still do serve a purpose for when you can do like the side questing stuff
Yeah.
and sending them out on
Yeah, you
jobs.
bet.
Right. Which I thought
Um,
that was a really cool part of the mechanics of how the game plays out is I don't want to, I guess mercenaries is the word for it. That you can basically send out extra members of your team to do mini
mhm.
quests while you're doing the main quest or whatever you want to
Yep.
do, and then they can, get you more money or whatever it is. I thought that was pretty fun. Added a whole nother layer to the game.
It did, and it's funny because it also like took you're in Ivalice, whatever, and the places that they go out and find. It's like, oh, here's Pandemonium. Oh, here is this thing from Final Fantasy One. Here's
Mm-hmm.
this thing from Final Fantasy. Like it ties all the Final Fantasies together, whether it means to or not.
Yeah.
When we did the connections piece connections episode, it's like that was just such an easy one to be like, oh, all the worlds have been in Ivalice, all
Right.
Final Fantasies come from the same place, and oh, by the way, they're on planet Earth.
And
So
it's this game is just the
yeah,
center of it all at times.
It
yeah,
is.
like see, look at all of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
um but yeah, the job class thing in here is super sweet. It's not the first Final Fantasy to do a job class system, but I think it's certainly the best one to do a job class system and how it did it.
Yeah.
I would
um
agree with that.
yeah, and when you get the characters, what I like about this is when you get the characters that are more storyline NPCs. Like Mustadio, he is I think, a mechanic in the game, and he uses a gun. Agrith is like a holy knight, but you don't have to necessarily stick with those job classes. Like you can have them be whatever you want, so it doesn't pigeonhole you. Even where it's like, oh, Musadio came in with a gun, and that's like his storyline.
Right.
Is he's this dude who's created this, sweet gun, and he's an engineer. But you can move him around if you want. Like you can have him do whatever. So I did really like that about the game.
You weren't shoehorned into playing a certain class with them. Yeah, I agree. Um,
No, yeah, you can do whatever you
yeah.
want. So, um,
I mean, so something interesting that I kind of enjoyed too with the battle systems in this one is every battle had a condition for victory that was unique, right? And it was very not similar to previous Final Fantasy entries because the conditions for winning were whoever is alive at the end of the battle. um, I kind of liked having different challenges throughout the game. Every battle, it was kept it fresh and unique. Sometimes you just needed to get one person out alive, or sometimes whatever the case might be for the story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Thought that was a kind of unique, nice part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, more often than not,
For small battles, yeah, it's clear the field.
yeah, it's clear. Yeah, clear the field for the most part. But yeah, every now and again, it's like protect so and so. Gosh, there is a battle right after you get done with Wygraf and Velius, where you meet. Oh man, I forget who it is, but he has the two ninja chicks with him, and you're trying to protect. Oh, is it Alma?
It's the Duke, Elmdor.
Yeah, Duke Elmdor, and you're trying to protect not one of the twins. There's the one who does heaven and hell.
Yeah, Malik is the male, and
Yep.
and is it Nala or Rafa? I can't remember.
Rafa.
Yeah.
Rafa.
Yep. And so Rafa, you're like trying to protect her because that's like the thing is to keep her alive. But these like ninja chicks, they're one shot kills.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, Raph is just running into the mix before you can really even catch up. It just takes forever because the NPC just plays so dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up another point too that I kind of had written down, is that this was kind of unique for me because you could permadeath a character. I don't think.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, is anyone in your party pretty much that wasn't a main NPC? If they died, they were gone and out from your team, and then you had to bring in new people.
Yep.
A whole unique kind of fun thing.
The crystal system was unique too. If you did permadeath a character, they turned into a crystal
on the field.
And it would apply to enemies as well. And if you went and picked up that crystal and they had a bunch of abilities that you didn't have, you could inherit them. And I thought that was a really neat mechanic that, would kind of, even if you were on the ragged edge and having to deal with some difficult mobs to keep them alive, you were doing that maybe for 3 extra turns to try to get a chance at a crystal or a chest that had some gear that maybe you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always interesting. Being able to choose the crystal and I
died
get these abilities
more than I want to tell you, trying to chase crystals early on in that game. Like I don't even want to. It's just shiny. It's there on the field. I want it, but yeah.
It's not that I want it as much as I need it.
Thank you. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, just the battle system with the job system, I think, is what really set it apart. And well, obviously the battle system too. Those two things really set that game apart from other Final Fantasies at that time. Sure, you'd had the job system before in Final Fantasy 3, and the Final Fantasy 3 had the job system, but that was still a Final Fantasy that was relative. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, 3 and 5.
3 and 5, you're right.
Yeah. But both of those were, I don't know if those had been out yet in the United States, or they had just come out in the Anthology and Chronicles series. Sure. And I don't know that 3 came out until later. I mean, I know 5 did. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It was a big difference. It was a big difference at that time, and I mean, the story was a lot darker, a lot more nuanced, and a lot of moving parts in that. And the gameplay was very, very different. The battle system, it was not an open world kind of run around like 7, like you had just seen in 7. Right. So yeah, well, I guess some of the other ones as well. But man, it's funny because they just knocked it out of the park with tactics, and it's funny because you do that, and then you take a look at games like 13, where it's like this is like
How did we get
a,
here?
a chronological Final
Yeah.
Fantasy. This is supposed to be the best that you
Right.
got,
This is what you're
and
good
you
at,
just lay,
and
yeah, and you just lay a total
yeah.
egg.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So to just like totally hit on a Final Fantasy
which
Tactics,
is
um,
I think TJ is right though. Kind of early on saying that this it was a unique kind of marriage of two different things creating this. Right, it is the tactic-based kind of gameplay with a Final Fantasy storyline,
mhm,
and the development and everything. It just seemed to really click and work. It obviously did. I
yeah,
mean, it sold millions of copies and still does. So um, it's a good game. It's not buggy. It plays well.
yeah, it's not.
Um, yeah. Uh,
When they remade the War of the Lions, the only thing that I wasn't really a huge fan of is them implementing the voice acting. Not that it was terribly
sure.
bad in the cutscenes, but it just seemed
Sure.
unnecessary.
And you probably, playing games, at least as a kid for me, I kind of make voices in my head more or less. Sometimes when I read books, I'll do that too for different characters. And then getting put,
Mm-hmm.
with this voice actor with it now. I have played War of the Lions, and the cutscenes, like you're saying, it works, but I'm okay without them too. So
Yeah.
I understand why they did it. You're trying to put enough new content into the remade, repackaged game, however you
Mm-hmm.
want to dice it
sure.
up, to entice people to buy it again. I'll be brutally honest. It worked on me. I bought it.
Oh,
Was
I
it
bought
the
it.
reason I bought it? No. I mean, the online stuff was the real reason I bought it. But I mean, you were fired up about it. The same reason I was fired up for, cutscenes being added to Chrono Trigger.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
If it was your favorite game, you were happy to plunk down, another 30-40 bucks to buy it again on a console that you could walk around with in the
Yeah.
PSP.
Oh, and I'll buy it again
I mean,
when it drops for PS,
with
7.
another remaster, extra pixels.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, one more job class.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I mean,
Yep.
the job class the job class was cool. I liked that the additional job classes. Not that the Onion Knight was anything great. The Dark Knight was okay too, but it was cool to get a little something
Something a
else
little
in
fresh. Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, something a little fresh and uh yeah, and the kind of going back to the characters when we talked about this a little bit. Some of the characters would have very unique abilities that other um that you couldn't get with the basic, cookie cutter NPCs that you could go and churn out the soldiers
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Like Orlando. Orlando was just out. He was outrageous. I mean, him
Was
and Agrius were just
really
like
good.
their holy sword abilities, just outrageous. Then like Rafa and Malik, their abilities, it was like, okay, well, it's gonna hit in this area here, and it might hit,
Yeah.
it might not, and it might hit your own person, which
Yeah.
was,
Infuriating.
unfortunate, infuriating, yeah. And then Mustadio had like, arm seal and leg seal, where it's like, oh, you can't move, oh, you can't act, and so everybody, those storyline characters that came into your party, they would have special abilities that were unique to them that made them. I mean, Orlando is I would say, one of the most broken characters of all time. Like once you get Orlando, it's like
Yeah.
game
Yeah.
over, rookies.
Yep.
Um, so, but I thought that the characters were just. And I know this isn't a story review, but the characters themselves were just so good in Final Fantasy and very unique. Who's Orlando? Orlando's son, who like uses
Uh,
the books.
Olan,
Olan, yeah, he uses the books, and it's like, please, like,
Galaxy Stop. That
yeah,
was a game changer.
if you could get it to hit, right?
If he landed it, but if he did, whoever he hit was out of the fight for pretty much the rest of the encounter.
Yeah, some of those ones that you just take the chance of it, the risk reward of it. Like the dancer ability, there was no risk. You knew it was going to hit everybody, and I mean, I can't remember if it was just like very, very rarely did it miss. I don't remember it really ever missing. But some of those ones like Raf and Malik, it's a variable. It's going to hit in this area, and maybe you're going to get hit, and maybe you're not. So I don't know, but yeah, just lots of and the fun thing is that you have access, like there's side quests in that one. You can get Cloud Strife, and in this weird, there's Aerith is in it. Well, the girl with the red ribbon, which
she's alive.
is Aerith.
She's alive.
Yeah,
right.
we're all saying that's Aerith, right?
That's
She's alive.
That's definitely. And then you got to find his sword, the Materia Blade, and on top of the volcano with Move Find.
Yeah.
So there's just all these like little things that and that was cool. That was a fun little part of that game, especially with the hype of Final Fantasy VII at that time. Final Fantasy VII was just absolutely through the roof bananas.
They had to put a cameo
but
in. They really did. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the game is excellent. The gameplay is excellent. The job classing is excellent. It's all good. And then the only thing that when I take a look at Final Fantasy Tactics and I go, ugh, is when they did the remake, or not the remake, when they did the second one, the Advanced Tactics Advanced.
Sure.
And I just like, for all of the reasons that I liked Final Fantasy Tactics, the job class, okay, that's still in there, but the story, it's like the story of Tactics. We started off like, oh, like you're reading, you're coming in from a snow day and you're reading a book, and oh, now you're in the book. Crazy.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my gosh, like for how dark and depressing and conniving Tactics was, it's like this is a bogus story.
I guess it's not even a fair comparison doing 10 and 10-2, because 10 wasn't that dark at the beginning. Tactics is a adult kind of game to me, my view of the content of the story. And like I said before this show, I did kind of recap a little bit on Tactics Advanced, and just what a 180 turn as far as the feel of the story.
Yeah.
My opinion is the reason it's like that, and I have some show and tell, and I'll again be descriptive, is right here for those of us looking at the Switch broadcast. I'm holding in my hand a copy of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance for the Game Boy Advance. Those of us keeping track at home, the Game Boy Advance is hardware for Nintendo.
Yes.
Nintendo is not known for, at least not until recently, it's not really known for super dark storylines, especially stuff on the Game Boy Advance. No. So, I mean, I feel like that was a miss on, it was Square Enix at the time. Not Squaresoft. This is post-merger. So, I feel like that was a bit of a miss. The follow-up, had you have waited, could have been graphically superior on the Nintendo DS if you were married to the idea of going with Nintendo. Could have been on the DS had they have waited a few years later. Or you could have tried to make a go of it with a sequel on the PSP instead of a remake of Tactics 1. Either way, missed opportunity, unfortunate. But Tactics Advance, and then there was Tactics A2.
I don't know anything about that one. What was?
It's similar premise. It's definitely a lot more kiddie. Thanks, Kyle, by the way, in Twitch there. Appreciate the props for busting out some Game Boy Advance stuff. But it's a kiddie story, and it's meant to be that way. So for those of us who were looking for Final Fantasy Tactics Part 2, we were left disappointed. Is it a bad game? No, it isn't. It's a pretty good tactics
Sure.
game. The job system is rich.
Mm-hmm.
It has different classes that you're not used to, like Sage and um, Marauder, and it was definitely interesting, but you had to temper expectations because it's not Final Fantasy Tactics Part 2.
Right. I mean, I would agree is that it would be weird for Nintendo at the time to put out a game like Tactics on Game Boy Advance for kids. It wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fun. I totally get it, but it's just
I mean, it makes sense.
It's just unfortunate that we didn't get Tactics 2. So
yeah,
because you think, oh, Tactics Advance, like, oh, we're getting more of this good stuff, and then it's like, oh, but we're not.
Right. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
gosh,
it's just such a good game. It is. I mean, it's one that you can play over and over and over, and there's so much to do. If you want to max out job classes, it's going to take you forever. There's like hunting for hides that you can do, with the side quests that you can do, and finding, like, being a treasure hunter. There's a lot of just side stuff that you can do on that game that just makes it a very rich game to play. I feel like it's got great replay value.
Mm-hmm.
The story itself is so deep and so intense that it's almost like, oh man, you're not gonna be able to get everything the first time that you play through it. There's just too much.
Nope.
There's just too much conniving. Yep. So, yeah. It's awesome.
It a solid game to play. Yeah, mechanics wise, definitely a good one.
Oh yeah, just an all-time great game. And they on the Switch right now, they've recently done Octopath Traveler, which we've talked about. And Octopath Traveler is, a traditional JRPG. You're on one side, they're on another. But the Triangle Project, as it is being named right now, is a Final Fantasy Tactics-esque grid strategy adventure like that. And that's that. There's a demo out for that. I've dabbled.
Good. Or are you gonna hold the opinion for the full thing? Because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. From what I've played so far, is definitely intriguing, and they definitely do some cool stuff with it. So,
not saying no yet.
It could be. No, it could be a great game. It could be a great game. Okay. So, I'm liking that.
Noted.
Interesting.
Had you not heard of that yet, TJ?
I am ashamed to say I had not.
We're gonna have to.
Well, it brings me joy that I could.
For what it's worth, the demo has been out for a good 6 months.
We're gonna have to kick you off the show. Sorry. And it's not allowed to be not up to date with all this stuff, man.
Yeah, I guess.
No,
it's a good one.
Check that out.
It's cool, and it seems like it is kind of the same level of sophisticated storytelling, and kind of dark, story that Final Fantasy Tactics has. I haven't played it a whole lot, but it seems like it looks like they went, hey, Final Fantasy Tactics, that was a dope game. Let's do the same thing. Both better graphics, and we're going to tweak some things.
I mean, if that's the case, I could easily be signed up on board for something like that.
I absolutely would be game for an Octopath-looking Final Fantasy Tactics game.
That's pretty much what it is.
Take my money.
I mean,
that's pretty much what it is. Octopath's good.
I'm looking forward to it if it is. It's becoming a thing then.
It's becoming a thing, all right.
Good.
Yeah. Kyle says, TG, I didn't know either. That makes you feel better.
It does make me feel better.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
All right. Good.
Get out. Get out.
Deuces. All right. Well, Anything else about tactics before we kind of close it on down?
Well, so what I will say is that again, show and tell.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Descriptions.
this is how I normally play Final Fantasy Tactics is on the OG PlayStation 1.
That is the OG.
Please forgive my absolutely beat
Scratch
up,
case, as it should be.
scratched up jewel case. This has seen a lot of
I mean, a lot of travel. Yeah, I get
um
it.
A lot of
it,
opening, a lot of closing.
it's been a workhorse for me. Definitely does not owe me anything. Um but the unfortunate part of that is that this summer support for the Vita, PlayStation 3, and PSP was pulled for the PS Store. So the only way you can actually play Final Fantasy Tactics if you'd like to pay for it, that is to download it to Android or iOS. It
Or
plays
just
okay.
download a ROM
Yeah,
of it.
it plays okay mobile, but it's not the same. I would
Mm-mm.
encourage you to do what you can to try to play the original, however you got to do it.
Yeah, we're not advocating for stealing games, but you do what you gotta
To
do.
play a game.
Do what you got to
Yep, go
do.
find an old PlayStation, a used one at some store that still works, or go.
Or just put it on Amazon. You can buy them on
Yeah,
Amazon for
yeah,
cheap.
or Goodwill or whatever you want to do. But get it because
Yeah.
this should be in your original PlayStation library. I would say for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's see what Final Fantasy Tactics goes for on PS1.
$1, Bob. Other than that, Colin, from my notes, the sounds and the music in this game are still some of my favorites. Even though
Done by a different.
Yeah.
Done by. It's not done by Nobuo Uematsu.
it's still
No, it is
Um,
not, but the guy did a bang up job.
amazing music in this game. Visuals for
Yes, very great
visuals
music.
for spells I thought was really well done because it was like
Mhm.
you were saying a few shows ago, Colin. They really focus in when you cast a big spell, and it the camera pans and moves, and there's cool sounds, and the screen goes dark or color sometimes or whatever, and
Mhm.
it like really showcases spell casting. That's fun.
And every once in a while, once out of every 10 spell casts, you get like the He-Man
Yeah.
Power of Grayskull, dialogue box where he, you have some one-liner right before you drop your big spell on the guy. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, that was pretty much it for my notes. I was gonna ask you guys super quick favorite weapons or anything like that, but we can do that another time. So,
I thought the guns were cool in the
Yeah.
game. I mean, it was. I mean, they're super effective in Mustadio's ability to stop somebody kind of in their tracks, or stop them from acting. I thought that was pretty cool. So, there wasn't a whole lot of weapons in there that you were just like, oh man, that weapon looked really cool or whatever. I think that just the practicality of having that long distance gun was sweet.
Orlando's Knight Sword,
yeah,
Excalibur,
Yeah,
auto
just
full-time haste, absorb holy, and one of the highest damaging weapons in the game.
it was.
If you ever wanted to trivialize some content, you flipped Ramza back to Squire and you gave him Excalibur because he was one of the only squires who could use knight swords, and you handled your business.
Just there you go.
Situations under
There
control.
you go.
Yeah,
Right on.
great game, all-time banger.
So again, you guys
will
put this.
There are not a whole lot of hills that I'll die on. I'll die on this hill. That Final Fantasy Tactics is one of, if not the best, Final Fantasy stories. Actually, stories and gameplay. Just love it.
I will go with you.
It's so easy to pick up. It's so easy to pick up and start up. That's the nice thing.
The beginnings of everything in the storyline too really drags you in deep. So I get it. I get it.
Yep.
Great characters. Delita, great character. The beginning with Algus and just golden goose.
So we got to save some of that for next time, though.
Yeah, we do. So, all right, well, I feel like we did it some justice.
I hope so. I do, because it is such an undertaking of something to talk about. But yes.
Oh man, yeah. If you can find it, and I'm looking on Amazon right now, you can buy it for $25 used. So, yeah, it's not like one of those. Oh man, you'll never be able to find it, except pay a couple $100 for it. So, if you're interested in playing one of the best Final Fantasies of all time, and if you like, if you like fantasy fiction, I think that this would probably be right up your alley.
I would agree, bud.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, that kind of wraps up where we're at. Just kind of doing some housekeeping things here. If you are on Twitter, you can follow us at Canary Podcast. We're on Spotify, iTunes, kind of all the big players. If you have an opportunity to leave us a review, please do. Please let us know how you think that we're doing. We communicate on Twitter, so if you want to drop a message about something, I do my best to reply, within an appropriate amount of time. Sometimes I don't reply right away because I have to think about some of the questions and some of the stuff that we get. It's like, man, that's a real thinker right there. So
let me scratch my chin and get back to you.
Really gonna look sophisticated. Oh man. All right. So I think that wraps up our housekeeping stuff. Anything else for the good of the order, gentlemen?
Good to be back.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody being patient. And thank you, gentlemen, for being patient.
Oh heck yeah, man. I'm excited to always do this stuff. So it's just it's good to be back.
Now that we've opened Pandora's box, we're gonna have to get back in the fold and get through this beast of a game, because one podcast is not gonna cut it, I'm afraid.
No. Pandora's box, one of the best, one of my favorite enemy skills from Final Fantasy VII.
See what I did there?
What are you gonna get? Nobody knows. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up. So yeah, it's been real.
It has been fun.
It has been real fun. Hey, have a good one, everybody. Alrighty, room, file, export, wave.